When Emily and Daniel's desperate 911 call came through on a quiet autumn night, officers had no idea they were about to step into a mystery that would follow them for the rest of their lives. On a cold autumn night, the county's 911 dispatch center received a call unlike anything they had ever handled before. The line opened with nothing more than shallow, uneven breathing. It wasn't the usual kind of prank call or accidental dial. There was something about the silence between those breaths that immediately unsettled the dispatcher. In the background, faint sounds came through the static rustling, a muffled thump, and what seemed like hurried movement. The operator repeated the script they had been trained to follow, but no voice came in response. The call stayed connected, and that was enough to treat it as an emergency. The location was traced to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, a cul-de-sac where trouble was rare and people prided themselves on knowing one another. The dispatcher notified patrol units, and within minutes, flashing lights cut through the stillness of the night as officers pulled into the street. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. A dog barked in the distance, porch lights flickered, and curtains shifted slightly as curious neighbors peeked outside. The GPS signal from the phone pointed directly to a two-story house at the end of the road. Its windows were dark, except for a dim light glowing upstairs. Officers approached with caution, knocking firmly on the door and calling out. No answer came. After several attempts, they made the decision to go inside, citing exigent circumstances since someone had clearly called for help. The interior looked strangely ordinary. The living room was neat, books stacked on a coffee table, a jacket draped casually over a chair. Nothing was broken or overturned, no immediate sign of violence. Yet, there was an unmistakable heaviness in the air, a silence that pressed against their ears. As they moved from room to room, that sense only deepened. In the kitchen, plates sat on the table with half-finished meals, as though someone had been interrupted. Upstairs, the faint smell of iron drifted through the hallway, sharp and unsettling. It was in one of the back bedrooms that officers stumbled upon the most chilling clue, a phone resting on the carpet, its screen lit up with the ongoing 911 call. The realization struck hard. Whoever had been on that line was right there in that room only moments earlier, desperately trying to reach help. Now the room was empty, the caller gone without a trace. The silence that followed was heavier than before, and each officer felt the weight of a mystery unfolding before their eyes. The phone lying on the carpet sent a wave of unease through every officer in the room. It was clear the call hadn't been accidental. Someone had dialed in desperation and then vanished. The strange part was how little evidence there seemed to be of a struggle. The bed was neatly made, the dresser undisturbed, and the curtains drawn shut, as though the night outside didn't exist. Yet something about the room felt wrong, as if the air itself carried the memory of fear. The officers carefully bagged the phone as evidence, but that only deepened the puzzle. If the caller had left, where had they gone in such a hurry? And why did they abandon the very device that could have connected them to safety? A thorough sweep of the house followed. Every closet was opened, every door checked, and even the attic was searched. There was nothing, no overturned furniture, no blood, not even a misplaced shoe. Downstairs, the living room still had the television glowing faintly with a news channel, the volume so low it could only be heard when the silence stretched afar. On the dining table, two plates sat side by side, dinner unfinished, silverware abandoned mid-bite. The discovery suggested there had been at least two people home that evening, but both were missing without leaving behind a single clear sign of what had happened. Attention quickly turned to the yard. Officers spread out, combing the grass and hedges with flashlights. That was when they found something worth noting, a set of footprints pressed into the damp soil leading away from the back door. Some impressions looked hurried, deep at the heel, as though someone had been running. Others appeared uneven, as if another person had been dragged or was stumbling. The trail stretched toward the woods beyond the fence before fading into leaves and shadows. Search dogs were brought in, sniffing along the path, but the scent broke off suddenly near the edge of the trees. Back at the station, the 911 audio was reviewed for the first time. What they heard left them unsettled. Beneath the sound of breathing, faint scratching could be detected, like fingernails scraping wood or something clawing at a surface. Then came a dull thud, followed by what resembled a creaking door. After that, only silence. The officers who had been inside the house couldn't shake the memory of that empty phone glowing in the dark, the call still active but its caller gone, as if swallowed by the night. In the days that followed, the case grew stranger with every lead investigators tried to chase. The couple who owned the house were officially reported missing when friends and co-workers confirmed they had not been seen since the night of the call. Their cars remained in the driveway, wallets and identification still inside. It was as if they had walked out of their own lives and disappeared into thin air. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing anyone who might have noticed something unusual. A few neighbors recalled hearing a dog barking more aggressively than usual that night, but no one saw anyone leave the house. Others admitted to noticing movement in the woods, shapes they assumed were deer, though the timing now seemed far too coincidental. Meanwhile, phone records revealed another disturbing detail. After the 911 call, both missing individuals' cell phones continued to send out signals, but they moved in erratic patterns. Towers pinged their locations miles apart, suggesting the phones were traveling quickly or being moved intentionally to throw off investigators. Text messages were also sent from their numbers, but the words made little sense, short, fragmented phrases that seemed out of character. Friends insisted the couple would never send such cryptic messages, especially without explanation. Some believed the phones had been taken, used by whoever was responsible for their disappearance. Detectives returned to the house for another sweep. This time, they searched deeper, pulling up floorboards, inspecting the basement foundation, and mapping out the property's original structure. In the couple's bedroom, an overlooked crawl space was discovered. Inside, they found belongings that did not match anything on record for the missing pair. Old photographs with faded edges, children's toys from another era, and worn clothing were scattered in the dust. Records showed a different family had once lived there nearly 2 decades earlier, a family who had also disappeared without explanation. Their case had gone cold, buried under years of unanswered questions. The discovery shifted the investigation. What was once viewed as an isolated emergency now appeared to be part of a pattern. The eerie 911 call was not just a single desperate cry for help, it might have been part of something repeating, something tied to the house itself. Detectives who once believed they were chasing a criminal began to fear they were chasing a cycle, one that kept swallowing people whole and leaving behind only silence. Investigators began to dig deeper into the history of the property, convinced that the house itself was the key to the mystery. Old county records revealed troubling details. Over the past 40 years, nearly every family who lived there had either left abruptly or vanished under strange circumstances. Some were reported as missing, others simply abandoned the house without notice, leaving possessions behind as though they had fled in panic. Yet none of these cases were ever connected until now. The pattern was undeniable, and what unsettled detectives most was how each disappearance seemed to echo the last, repeating in quiet, chilling ways. Special forensic teams combed through the crawl space again, pulling out the items left behind. Among them were journals belonging to the family that had lived there 2 decades earlier. The final pages described increasing fear, with the writer mentioning scratching sounds along the walls and footsteps in the hallways at night, even when everyone was asleep. One entry ended abruptly with the haunting words, "We hear them outside, closer every night. If anyone finds this, know we tried to leave, but it's already too late." The journal gave detectives an eerie connection to the muffled scratching heard on the 911 call. To test the theory, investigators installed surveillance equipment around and inside the house. Motion sensors, night vision cameras, and audio recorders ran continuously for several weeks. The footage collected only deepened the mystery. Frames skipped inexplicably, shadows moved across rooms with no source of light, and audio captured faint whispers that didn't belong to any member of the investigative team. One recording captured what sounded like the front door creaking open, yet no one had entered. Another picked up footsteps pacing across the upstairs hallway when the house was completely empty. The officers who had been part of the first response reported growing uneasy. Some admitted they couldn't sleep, plagued by nightmares of the empty house and the glowing phone still connected to the dispatcher. Others confessed they felt watched whenever they reviewed the evidence, as though the events of that night were following them. Despite no confirmed suspect, no confirmed intruder, and no bodies, the case no longer felt like a typical investigation. The 911 call was more than evidence, it was a warning that something about the house resisted being explained. And with every unanswered question, the weight of the mystery pressed harder on those tasked with solving it. Months turned into years, and the case of the missing couple slipped into the same silence that had swallowed the families before them. Officially, it remained open but inactive, filed alongside other cold cases with no suspect, no physical evidence, and no resolution. Yet for the officers who had been there that night, the memory of the call never faded. They admitted quietly to colleagues and family that the sound of the breathing, the scratching, and the sudden thud from the recording haunted them in ways no other case ever had. Some retired early, citing stress, while others refused to drive near that cul-de-sac again. The house was eventually boarded up, deemed unfit for occupancy, but even sealed away, it continued to cast a shadow over the community. What unsettled investigators most was what happened after the property was abandoned. Dispatchers occasionally reported receiving calls from the same disconnected number tied to the missing couple's phone. Each time, the line was filled with silence, punctuated by faint noises eerily similar to the original recording, muffled breathing, scratching, and a door creaking open. Tracing the calls led nowhere. The number no longer existed, and yet it continued to reach the emergency line. Some believed it was a technical glitch, but the timing of the calls always coincided with anniversaries of the original disappearance. The community turned the story into whispered legend. Children dared each other to walk past the boarded house at night, while adults avoided the street altogether. For those who lived nearby, the sound of dogs barking at unseen figures or the sense of being watched when walking home after dark became common. The house stood as a silent reminder of what was lost, and the story of the 911 call was repeated with growing dread each time. For the officers, it was never just a story. They had walked through the rooms, seen the glowing phone on the carpet, and felt the air thick with something unexplainable. They carried the weight of unanswered questions: who had made the call, what happened to the couple, and why the house seemed to erase its inhabitants. To them, the case blurred the line between criminal investigation and something far darker. Even today, the 911 recording remains locked away, accessible only to a handful of officials. Those who have listened to it insist the sound cannot be forgotten. What began as a routine emergency call became a haunting memory, a mystery without closure, and a chilling reminder that some cries for help echo long after the voices that made them are gone.